Welcome. My name is Christina Joy Lyles. I go by Steen, and I lead the work to make DonorsChoose a force for racial equity in our public schools. I cannot tell you how much I have been looking forward to this moment. I'm not going to lie, I'm so nervous, and that's because what we're about to share really is the culmination of thousands of teachers answering in-depth survey questions about what they're experiencing in the classroom. It's the product of racial equity leaders devising the best survey questions, and it's the result of so much work by my incredible colleagues at DonorsChoose. And here's how it all began. 3 years ago, we started inviting teachers to share their racial identity as part of creating a classroom request on DonorsChoose. Nearly 400,000 teachers have done, and that has created then the largest contact list of teachers of color in the country. And that has given us the opportunity to not just support, but to listen to and learn from these educators at a whole new scale. And so the survey that we're going to share today was completed by thousands of teachers, including white teachers and female teachers of color, as well as 1,700 male educators of color, making this the largest ever survey centering this group. Some of our findings quantify trends that people have been talking about qualitatively, and I think some of our findings are going to both surprise and intrigue you. So why then our focus on Black male teachers? For one, they are profoundly underrepresented, with just 2% of our country's public school teachers identifying as Black men. And for another reason, our survey data underscored that the Black male teaching experience is unique. And maybe most importantly, we have entered a racial climate where these teachers are not only shouldering disproportionate responsibilities, but they are bringing valuable qualities that ultimately enrich the classroom environment, which in turn all plays a role in their decisions to leave or stay in the profession. Now, in undertaking this survey, our goal is not simply to capture the voices of male teachers of color at a whole new scale. We want to elevate our findings to an audience that can put them into action across the country, which is, of course, why you are all here. So here's how today is going to go. We are first going to hear from our co-authors of this study at the Center for Black Educator Development, led by the one and only veteran educator and activist, Sharif El-Mekki. Then I'll bring Dr. Travis Bristol into the conversation. Dr. Bristol is an associate professor at UC Berkeley, and he is best known for his research on Black men in the teaching profession. And then lastly, I'll turn the mic over to our special guest, John Legend, yes, John Legend, who will engage in a conversation with really superstars in their own right. And that are two Black male teachers who are on the front lines in classrooms today. And so with that, Sharif, welcome aboard. Are you ready?
I am ready. Thanks for having me.
You got it. Hey, Sharif. Okay, let's get started. We're going to jump right into some survey findings. So Sharif, as you have established, right, part of the reason that we want to recruit and retain Black male teachers is because of an instinct, right? An instinct that these educators bring unique value to the job. And our first finding seems to quantify this instinct. And here's that finding, right? So Black male teachers report spending an average of 4.6 hours a week tutoring students and 5.4 hours mentoring students outside of class. And that is more than any other teacher demographic. And Black male teachers have more students hanging out in their classrooms outside of regular class. And that is more than teachers of any other demographic. Now, later, we're gonna, Dr. Bristol and I are gonna talk more about the invisible tax and some of the burdens being placed on teachers of color. But what surprised us about these findings, and maybe what relieved us too, is that teachers who were reporting these higher numbers or this greater student engagement on these questions were no more likely to report burnout. In fact, they were slightly less likely to report feeling burnt out. I'm curious, Sharif, how you'd respond to that and what you think is going on here.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting, and I agree, relieved about that. And I'm also glad that you will dive in with Dr. Bristol about not ignoring invisible tax and the potential for burnout. But I think what's great about this is it really calls out the passion, the calling, this community focused orientation that many Black men bring to schools, and why they want to work with children. And we know that many teachers are prepared to work in systems and in schools, but Black men are often prepared to work with children and communities, that they're from. And so having that kind of two types of orientation is great when it's both, right? You can navigate the system and you bring forth to bear your lived experience with children. It makes me think about this servant leadership mindset that so many Black men bring to the table. And it also makes me think of this Black Educator Hall of Famer, Mary Church Terrell, who years ago talked about lifting as we climb as educators, and how many Black men are viewing themselves in that perspective about lifting themselves and the community as they climb, particularly working with students. So I just even think about my own relationships that I was able to develop and I was so excited about. And it was part of the passion for teaching that fueled me. And so during my prep, after lunch, after class, after school, building relationship, taking students to games, all those type of things, I think was for me part of educating, part of school, and part of what a community is. And I think that is what we're seeing in this particular data set and responses.
Sharif, that really resonates. In fact, here's another finding, and I'm curious, I'm going to share a couple and see what your reaction is. Another finding then that fascinated us is that graduates of historically Black colleges and universities, so HBCUs, show the greatest engagement with students of all. So we showed the finding that you see here to Dr. Michael Lomax and his team at the United Negro College Fund, so UNCF, and they see this as a quantification of what they call the HBCU effect. So this proof that if you went to a college where the environment was affirming and Black professors mentored you, then you're that much more likely to pay it forward and seize opportunities to be a mentor yourself. So I'm hearing that in what you just shared. And even though I am a very proud Spelman graduate, I'm married to a Howard alum, both my parents teachers, went to HBCUs, Hampton and St. Aug. I'm going to resist the urge to sit with this finding, and instead I'm going to dovetail it into two more discoveries and then catch your reaction. And here are those discoveries. We found that teachers of color are more likely to have entered the profession because they wanted to teach a curriculum that affirms the identities of students of color. And Black male teachers were more likely than any other group to cite this as their motivation to become an educator. And we then found that additional motivation was driven more so by a teacher's age, even more than by their race. And that motivation is seeing teaching as social justice work. So of teachers who started teaching after 2010, 62% strongly agreed that I became a teacher because I see teaching as social justice work. And so for teachers who entered the profession before then, fewer were motivated by teaching as social justice work. Knowing so much about what you are doing at the center, I'm so curious, what is your reaction to this? And what do you think that districts can do with this data?
Yeah, this is really interesting, particularly this growth, because this idea of social justice work is exactly what attracted me into teaching decades ago, and meeting Dr. Martin Ryder and having conversations with him. And he saw that I was very intent on using activism as a way to find my way. And he said, you know what, the purest form of activism is teaching Black children. And that's fueled me for decades now. But I think is also interesting in this 2010, you see this increase and it's being sustained now. And I think some of what people are seeing is there's been a pushback. There may be some regression. There may be more vocal attempts to downplay the activism that teaching well is. And James Baldwin said this years ago, that teaching is revolutionary and teaching Black children is a revolutionary thing. But I think we have ebbs and flows, and we're at this moment, the past couple of decades, where people have a heightened understanding that we don't just need to teach children content, we need to teach children content and about life and help them connect the dots. And I think this is part of the calling that these Black men are sharing that brought them to lead a classroom with this understanding of what being a person of color, being a Black man in America has a lot of similarities of being a Black boy in American schools. And so being able to help a child navigate that, and then also understanding what we're teaching and the positive racial identity development of this child is absolutely important. So I think for districts, having a recognition that it's the content and the children, it's the job, and then there's the work. And that work, that community-based, solutions-oriented, having a positive racial identity development, which has been absolutely critical for our teacher apprenticeship for high school and college students through our Freedom Schools Literacy Academy. It is the literacy, but it's also the positive racial identity development that we find absolutely critical to the work, is germane to our whole mission about how we develop future teachers. So I think American schools can take this to account and also be very clear about the pushback. Right now, we have Black teachers and others being fired for speaking truth, teaching about history, putting everything in a CRT frame when so much of it is a different type of CRT, is culturally responsive teaching, being proficient with in cultures that you're teaching and leading in. So districts have to pay very close attention about how they're supporting teachers and thus students in this space.
Sharif, I think that knowing that we have many district officials tuned in here, there is something I think that I'm hearing around this idea of the framing of what teaching is as a part of really a recruitment strategy for getting more teachers. And this data is incredibly compelling, just thinking about how the motivation here being driven by age could be really telling about what this chart might look like in 10 years after the years of what we've seen over the past 2 years around folks and their activism and wanting to show up in different ways within the classroom. Sharif, let's also talk about when someone is inspired to become a teacher. So in our last slide, we talked about how the data seemed to show that it was a motivation driven more so by age or when you enter the teaching profession. And what we see here is that the data show that gender is actually the strongest predictor, more so than race, with male teachers of all identities, all racial identities, deciding much later in life to pursue teaching as a profession. What do you think about that? Tell us your thoughts.
Yeah, this is so interesting. And you also mentioned HBCUs earlier that I want to tie into here. And I'm wondering if, and we saw like Dr. Ivory Tolson years ago said, Black men who attend HBCUs have a higher interest in education. And I can't help but to wonder like how much of that is because of the modeling that they saw. They were in a community, they were in an affirming community, they had relationships, they were being mentored. And so it's natural to say, you know what, I felt good. I felt affirmed. I felt responded to and supported. And now I'm going to pour that into the next generation. And interesting story, when we started the fellowship, Black Male Educators for Social Justice years ago, to support Black men who were from all around the country, but they were all working in Philadelphia. One of the key things that as we started talking and getting to know each other is we recognized that we had never been engaged in elementary, middle, high school, or even in college about this idea of teaching. So we weren't tapped on the shoulders and invited into the profession until after we graduated from college. And that was 17 Black men who were all successful in their work. But it wasn't lost on us, like, wow, we were all connected with and invited into this profession afterwards. And one of the things that we did was start asking our colleagues, many of them were white women, about, hey, when did an adult have a conversation with you about becoming a teacher? The average response was third grade. So third grade for one group and post back for another group, which was really interesting. And for us, that is another reason why teacher academies and high school and college teacher apprenticeships for us is just germane to our work and how we create this foundation, give this early exposure as well as clinical experiences where they actually teach first, second, and third graders as a ninth grader, as an 11th grader, as a junior in college. And so that they have this understanding and experience to grapple with. But we also help them see, and they're in tune to this already, but we point out the connections, the inextricable connections between social justice, racial justice, and educational justice. And I think as people develop and see and they're exposed to it, you see a higher interest in Black men starting to wonder, okay, how can I get into this work? It's really important.
Sharif, as from our work together and even from our moments before this, I think a lot about my own. I have a Black son. I have a Black daughter and a Black son. I think about my Black son seeing himself in his teachers and the significance of that, the research-backed significance of that. And so much of what you're sharing here, I think, is just another proof point of how important it is, both around our recruitment strategies being wholesome. So you mentioned we should be thinking about mid-career, like all these different moments in which we can grab Black men and bring them into the profession. And then also, what does it look like for a young Black boy to see himself in an elementary age teacher, which we know there are not nearly enough. And so I just want to flag that is both personal and I appreciate.
Yeah, 100%. We've had so much feedback from families who have first, second, and third graders being taught by our Black high school, Black college youth. Mm-hmm. And often they say, you know what, that's my child's first Black teacher. That's my child's first Black male teacher. And we're excited to have a partnership with UNCF where we started a fellowship, the Black Teacher Pipeline Fellowship. And the inaugural group of 4 young Black men who are committing as freshmen and sophomores in college to become teachers. So coming back home to teach. And when I think about them, and also think about and they've all participated in our Freedom School Literacy Academy as apprentices, how many youth were saying like, you're my first one. I'm like, they're not even teachers yet, they're apprentices. But for first, second, and third graders to be able to recognize that and point that out to us consistently is both gratifying as well as alarming. We're like, hey, we got to do a much better job in our districts to make sure that our apprentices are not the first, even though we're really absolutely grateful that they are part of the program.
Sharif, I wish I could talk to you all day, but I also want to bring in Dr. Bristol into this conversation because we're talking about mostly around recruitment right now. And I want to bring in Dr. Bristol to talk also about where we are with respect to retention and teaching strategy. So thank you so much, Sharif. It has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for being a co-author of this study. Dr. Bristol, welcome.
How are you, Steen? So good to see Sharif.
I know, I feel like we're all old friends here, but okay, let me get right to it then.
Yes.
Dr. Bristol, so where Sharif and I just left off is mostly around recruiting male educators of color, but I also want to talk about teaching conditions and how that is affecting retention. So the survey seems to confirm what data has been telling us for years, which is that Black teachers expect to leave the teaching profession sooner than teachers of all other identities. And getting under the hood a little bit, let's look at a couple of survey findings. So the survey found that across genders, Black teachers are 3 times more likely than other teachers of color to report that because of their race, they are expected to discipline students of color, and about twice as likely to report being expected to do extra mentoring of students of color, and also to teach colleagues about racism and to teach students about racism. Dr. Bristol, I'm curious what your reaction is to that.
Yeah, I think one, not surprised at all. I think it's important for us in thinking about these findings to hold that the anti-Black ideas that are present outside of schools are reproduced and are present inside of schools. And so outside of schools, Black people are positioned and made to be and are feared. Black men in particular. For 9 minutes and 29 seconds, George Floyd had a white police officer have his knee on his neck because George Floyd was to be feared. And so those sort of anti-Black ideas that are present outside are present inside, and those adults, those teachers who are positioned as someone to be feared are also controlling and are assigned to the tasks that no one else wants to do, such as discipline, for example. So not at all surprised, but it's important, I think, to raise these ideas so that we can begin to disrupt them.
That's right. And thank you for bringing up Brother George Floyd. I think we can never have conversations about race and not think about saying their name. So thank you for doing that. And I want to bring in a couple more findings for you. So male teachers of color who agreed that racial and ethnic differences between students and teachers create tensions at their school were more than 3 times as likely to also agree that because of their race, they are expected to serve as a school liaison to families of color. Now, some might say that these findings are quantifying what I know we've all heard John King, former US Secretary of Education, call this invisible tax, right? This tax that educators of color pay. Could you just talk to us a bit about this dynamic?
Yeah. So when I think about and I see these findings, I think about that canonical text that Lisa Delpit wrote many years ago, Other People's Children.
Yeah.
And still in US classrooms, given the ethno-racial composition of the teacher workforce, where roughly 80% of all US public school teachers are white, and more than half of the students in US public schools are students of color, that the teacher workforce and that how we are organized schools and how we interact with the children who are in those schools, because of the ethno-racial composition of the teacher workforce, that those children are still viewed as other people's children. And because they are viewed as other people's children, the people who should be working with them are the people who are like those children. And so this tax, I think, is really part and parcel because sadly in this country, we aren't preparing teachers, all teachers, we aren't providing ongoing professional development for teachers to see Black and brown children not as other people's children, but as my child. And so we outsource. And so we say somebody else should do this work. Mm-hmm. And so there's much work for us to do in the preparation and then the ongoing professional development of teachers.
It's so interesting to think about this idea of the tax, and it's so complicated because I think part of what we saw in some of the findings that I discussed with Sharif is around how motivating some of our seemingly motivating the higher engagement with students can feel, and how seemingly motivating it can feel to have this mentorship component. Thinking about my own, stepping into the seat as the student for a minute, I'm thinking about my mentors and folks I looked up to when I was in the classroom. I was the one hanging out in Mr. Wade's classroom at Spring Valley High School. I was the one hanging out, and he was my only Black male teacher. And so there's something so complex about the tax and yet the motivations that I'm just sort of making. Any reactions you have to that? To another finding?
I absolutely. I think that it is this sort of double-edged sword, right? That indeed, as you were having with Sharif, that teachers of color, Black teachers in particular, they come to this work because they see it as a calling, because they want to create teaching conditions that maybe they did not have. And so they are investing in their students. They're spending time after school, during their lunch with their students. And some of the research that I did on Black male teachers many years ago, some of the qualitative findings, and I know we'll hear some more about this, was that these Black men said that it was a burden, that when they were teaching their lessons, when their colleagues would bring in students, during their lessons, during their lunch period, when they were eating to get some sustenance, even while they were correcting papers and planning for their next day's lesson, that all of this became a burden. And so it is this sort of two-edged sword, right? Because yes, people are coming, these Black teachers and Latinx teachers are coming to the profession, and they're saying, but when do I eat? When do I plan? When do I do the regular things that people expect me to do so that I can keep my job, right? And I can't keep my job if I'm spending all of my time monitoring misbehaving students. I can keep my job if I can plan and execute and enact rigorous content, rigorous lessons for my students. But because of how schools are organized, I don't have the time and space to do that. And so it is the double-edged sword. And I think that what we should be thinking about is, how do we support all teachers to support all children so that they're not other people's children, so I don't have to outsource, right, behavior, if you will, to someone else.
Oh, that's fascinating, Dr. Bristol. And as an extension of this invisible tax, I want to talk about burnout. I feel like that's the buzzword where, I don't know if you feel the same way. I feel like since the pandemic, I've heard the word more than I've ever heard. And I think it's because folks have this like bleeding of like work and life. So when it comes to burnout, the data seems to tell us that Black male teachers reported the lowest burnout rate at 39%. So for folks tuning in, the lowest burnout rate, meaning Black men showing us they were least, not as burnt out, compared to, for example, 55% of Black female teachers.
Yeah.
I'm really surprised to
Yeah.
learn that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you surprised
Yeah.
at this idea that the
Mm.
data, if we took it on face value of this slide, would be telling us that Black male teachers might be less burnt out? What do you think of that? You surprised?
I am surprised, and I think there's a lot going on here. But let me try to think through or share what I think might be going on here. So given this previous slide that Black teachers are saying that they are being taxed, you would expect that they would experience the same level of burnout regardless of their gender. And here is what I would say is the power and the persistence of toxic masculinity manifesting itself in these data. Men are
Tell us more about what that means.
Yes, of course. Let me not, yeah. So men are, I would say that it's, again, what happens outside of schools happens inside of schools. So outside of schools, men are positioned, socialized to not talk about and share how challenging something might be. We swallow, we have to be, we believe that we have to be super people. And I think this is also particularly true for Black men. So in the face of teaching in a school context where I am perceived as the dean of discipline, where I'm perceived and positioned as the police officer and not the teacher, where I'm constantly having to take care of everyone else's problems, of course, I'm going to feel this burnout. But because of toxic masculinity, I cannot share with others that I am burnt out. And one of the things and in my own work and working with men of color in Boston, in New York City, and most recently in Compton, California, that when men of color came together in these affinity spaces, in these safe spaces, they were able to say, actually, I am burnt out, but I don't have the language or the tools to communicate that outside of this safe space. And so for me, I think that one of the implications is that we should not view these data as saying that Black men are somehow not less, or not, that they do not burn out more than Black women. I think that what we should view these data and see this as that with the lens of how toxic masculinity can be reproduced in schools, that we need to maybe create more safe spaces for Black men, Latinx men to talk about how they are burnt out and to support them and give them the tools and language to say, actually, these are the things that are happening in schools that are making me feel like I want to leave.
That is really fascinating, because I think it's getting at, are you experiencing job burnout? Just might come out differently. Yeah. That an individual, that a Black male teacher might tell you that they are experiencing higher hours, whatever it is, that the language of saying burnout might not be as culturally responsive as we would expect it to be. So I think you're flagging this beautiful nuance around how we should and might not want to interpret putting more on Black men in the classroom because, for example, they are necessarily less burnt out.
Yes.
I'm gonna, again, like I said with Sharif, Dr. Bristol, I have been long fan of your work. I am so grateful for what you are doing to move the needle in this field. I am also really grateful for all that you were thinking about with respect to loners and groupers, this idea of being the only in your environment. I think many folks outside of even the Black community can say it applies to how they think about their work. So from me to you, I just want to say thank you again. And also to you, Sharif, I know you're listening in. Thank you for both of you for the work you've done to help us further the field here. So
I just want to say thank you and the folks at DonorsChoose for doing this consequential work. It is transformative.
Coming from you. Got a little token. Thank you. Okay. So folks, we've just heard is Dr. Bristol and Mr. Sharif El-Mekki giving us really research, academic, and practitioner context to the survey findings. And we are now going to pivot to hear directly from those on the front lines. As excited as I am to nerd out on survey data, could do it all day, we have now come to what could be the most memorable portion of this webinar, and that is a conversation moderated by none other than artist and activist John Legend. You're here! Hi, John.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. My goodness. John Legend, you have been a long champion of public school classrooms and teachers of color. In fact, nearly 4 years ago, folks, John was an inaugural supporter of the DonorsChoose I See Me campaign, which was about celebrating the power of students, especially students of color, seeing themselves in their teachers and in their learning environments. And it was the data underneath the I See Me campaign that has made this male teacher of color survey possible. So truly it is full circle. John, honestly, thank you so much for your support, for all that you've done with and for DonorsChoose in classrooms. And we are so excited about the conversation that you are about to have with these public school teachers. And with that, I am delighted to pass you the mic to get going.
Thank you, Christina. It's so great to speak with you and to speak with all of you who are on the call. Thank you, DonorsChoose, for doing this important work and doing the work to understand the issues that male teachers of color are facing. And I think it's such an important conversation for us to have. I know from my own personal experience that having Black men on staff at the school that I attended was really important. And we had very few Black men on staff at the school I attended in my hometown of Springfield, Ohio. But the person that probably shaped my life the most out of all of my high school faculty and staff members was my guidance counselor, who was a Black man named Mr. Dixon. And I had no academic teachers who were Black. I had one gym teacher who was Black, a Black male. And so Mr. Dixon was truly one of the only Black men in the building who were an adult. And Mr. Dixon was so influential to me. He set a very high bar for me and my brother and held us to it. He saw our potential and wanted to make sure that we didn't mess it up. And I think it's important for a young person, even someone who was really self-motivated like I was, to have that sort of guidance and support. And Mr. Dixon was someone I was accountable to, who I trusted, who I knew had my back, but also held me to a high standard. And neither of my parents had gone to college, but Mr. Dixon took me under his wing and mentored me through the college application process. He believed I could do and be anything I dared to dream, that I could go to any school I wanted to go to. And he encouraged me onto that path. And I really believe I wouldn't be where I am today without him and people like him who mentored me. So I think it's important that we encourage men of color to get involved in education, that we support them and sustain them so that they stick around and feel like it's a fulfilling job for them and rewarding job for them, and that we give them all the support they need to be the best educators they can be. And I'm really thrilled that I get to speak with some actual teachers. I'm really looking forward to talking to Mr. Holmes and Mr. Griffin about their experience in their classrooms and what we can do to support them. So let's bring them on. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Hello and good afternoon.
Okay, wonderful. All right, gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be meeting you this way, and I'm excited to talk to you about this issue and hear your perspective so that everybody in the audience can understand where you're coming from. So our teacher panelists come from the Bronx and from Missouri, and it's exciting to have this conversation with you. I won't get into your bios because they're on the screen, but let's quickly go around and understand what the impact of Black male teachers has been for you. How many Black male teachers did you have before you went to college? Mr. Holmes, we'll start with you.
Sure, perfect. And thank you for having me. So prior to going to college, I actually had two Black male teachers, and one was in middle school in 7th grade, and another one was up in high school.
And you, Mr. Griffin?
I only had one, and that was in 5th grade. Probably the best teacher I've ever had.
And what is the staff like where you are currently working? Are you one of the only Black males on staff there?
Yeah, it's me, and there's one other Black male there with me. He's the counselor. So I know you just spoke about that. And so he's has a very similar relationship that your counselor had.
Yeah, we needed that. And it was so important for me and really every other Black student that went to my school. I went to a majority white school, but had a sizable minority of Black students there. And it was so like comforting and encouraging to have someone that you could trust in such an important position, which guidance counselor is a really important position.
Yeah, at my school, we currently have 3 Black male staff. So out of 100 staff, we have 3.
Wow. So
including-
what made you enter the teaching profession? Who inspired you to become a teacher? Why do you teach? Whoever wants to go first.
You want me to go first? Oh, okay, perfect. So I always had the desire to become a teacher as a young male student. I think a lot of it was just based off my personal experience growing up in a single parent household, the absence of my father, and I lacked a lot. So going to school and having a Black male teacher in the 7th grade in that middle school, which is like a pivotal time when things are changing and you're exploring things or whatever. So to have that relationship with a teacher was like, wow, this teacher really cares for me well beyond the classroom. And I really wanted to do that work. And I continued my education, went through school, and came back and I actually teach at the school in which I graduated from. So my math teacher is actually like still here on staff.
Oh, so
And
you're colleagues now.
we are colleagues, yes.
That's very cool. Mr. Griffin, how about you? Why did you want to get into teaching, and was there any particular person that inspired you to want to do that?
So I have a funny kind of situation. I actually just wanted to be a teacher because I wrote compositions and things like that for like bands. And so I just needed somebody to play my music so that I could try to make some money. And so when I got to college, like it just so happened that I felt like a music education degree was more valuable than a music composition degree. I felt like I can compose if I don't have a degree, but if I actually wanted to teach or something, I needed that education degree.
Yeah.
And it just stuck. And it turns out I was good at it. And then I ended up student teaching at an elementary school. And to see the impact that I had on especially the Black students that were there, because they were like run up and hug me and tell me I was their favorite teacher. And I had only seen them like 3 weeks. That stuck with me. And so I just fell in love with education that way.
Let's think about the issue of recruiting and retention of Black male teachers. When you think about that question, how do we attract more Black males to this profession? How do we support them in a way that keeps them around? What are some of the things that come to your mind that would be encouraging and make it more likely that we are able to attract more and retain more for this important part of our society? Whoever wants to go first.
So I think at my school, I had the opportunity to be among many different committees and things like that. So I think it starting with the hiring committee, right? So when our hiring committee is meeting and we're looking for candidates and et cetera, ideally it's like no Black, like out of all these resumes we receive, like no one here was good enough to make it to a demo lesson, then we have to do some question around that. And who does the committee consist of? Are there any Black teachers a part of that committee? So with only 3 Black male teachers in our school, like how many teachers do you actually think are a part of that? So I think that shifting the dynamic and really thinking about diversity and equity and the impact of that at the school level, it really sets the tone in which we could use moving forward to recruit and to retain our teachers. The other thing is mentorship. I think that it's very important to have the mentors. As a Black male teacher, I had mentors, but I had to seek them outside of my school building. So it wasn't like, hey, this is your person. You're going to be able to do intervisitations. You can meet with this person once a week. There was none of that. So I also think that just starting with hiring, as we think about recruitment and really having diverse teams in which we look to recruit and retain.
Yeah. Well, how about you, Mr. Griffin?
I think looking especially at what the data said from the research, it also needs to start at a younger age. And so that's why I gravitate more towards younger kids. By the time they've hit middle school, high school, they've already decided that teaching isn't a viable option for them.
Mm.
And so if we start when they're younger, to let more Black males know, like, this is a career path that you can choose and be successful at, then I think in the long run, we'll see more Black male teachers trying to enter the workforce.
And do you think part of them not believing that this is a viable career path is just not seeing people that look like them doing it? Or are there other factors you think that young people are seeing?
I think that's a huge part of it, not seeing very many people that look like them, but also conversations about sexuality or other things play into it too.
As a female type of job
Yeah.
that men don't typically do.
Yes.
That's very interesting. And obviously you all provide an example of intelligent Black men who want to lead and who want to teach these young people, but they don't have a lot of examples of that. And so you could see why they don't envision themselves doing it in the future. Give us a little peek into your classroom, Mr. Griffin. Let's talk about your music education classroom. What do you want the audience to know about what it's like to be a teacher and what it's like to work with your students?
So my classroom is less of a traditional classroom setting. And I think a lot of times people will look at me a little bit weird because it's not structured the same way you would see a normal classroom. So I treat my class more like a family meeting or a family dinner where we're just gathering, we talk about how the day's going, how they feel, and I let them guide me to where we're going to go for that lesson, whatever we're going to talk about. And I find that my students are a lot more passionate about learning when they can drive what they're doing, what we're discussing, not neglecting all the important things and the foundational things, but if they can choose where their learning is going, they're a lot more engaged and passionate about it. And that's just what my classroom is. It works for me. I like to let my kids lead everything.
Amazing. How about you, Mr. Holmes?
Yeah, so I currently teach inside of an integrated co-teaching model classroom. And what that is, we call it an ICT. So there's percentages and we have a certain amount of students with disabilities in our classroom. So it's like a 60-40. So in any given school year, you'll probably have up to 12 students and their needs vary, right? Some students have classification as autism, learning disability, etc. Honestly, my students come from all different backgrounds and culture, and they live in one of the poorest school districts that has historically have been underserved for many years. But every day these students show up and they prove that diversity is a strength. And when people come together and work together, everyone benefits.
That's beautiful. As you listen to the conversations before us and you looked at some of the survey data and some of the findings of the research, anything that you learned today or that resonated with you especially or connected with your experience from the data that you want to affirm through your own personal experience, either of you?
I think for me, the biggest thing that resonated me with was how much time I spend outside of my classroom with my students. I personally don't take planned time or lunch. I spend every single minute of my day with a kid at some point. Yeah. I think I show up to school probably an hour and a half before I have to, and there are already kids in my room, like running around the building looking for me. And this is a elementary school.
Yeah.
And so lunchtime, I'm going to sit in the classroom just to help a kid with reading. 3 o'clock, I pick up students for private lessons and things like that if they can afford it or if they're interested. So I found that for me personally, I spend every single hour of my day with a student.
They were just talking about burnout. Do you feel like that would lead you to be burnt out, or do you feel like it's something that you're able to handle and that you're supported enough to handle?
When I sit back, I guess sometimes I feel like, oh, I'm a little tired, especially like I'm on spring break right now. So days like today, I feel it. But in the moment, when you're in the thick of it and you see that kid thriving or the joy on their face when they're doing something, I think I don't feel it then. And so I don't get burnt out when I'm in the school. It's more like when I actually sit back and take it all in what has happened. Then
do you think this extra time and the extra connection you have is because you're a Black male teacher and you're one of the few in your building, and so many kids want to grab onto you?
Yeah, so for the kids, I'm in Ferguson, Florissant, so Ferguson, Missouri, where all the Mike Brown situation happened. And so I think for a lot of kids, I'm a brother for some of them. So I look like their older brother. For some, I'm their uncle. I have students that call me Pops because they don't have a connection with their dad.
Yeah.
And some students just enjoy like my personality or just being inside of my music environment. I think a lot of things play into that, but I think the Black males in my school, we have a different relationship than everybody else with our students.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Holmes, what did you think about the data and the research you saw today and how it connected with your own experience?
Yeah, so actually I wrote down that the 39% of Black teachers, the burnout rate that was shared. And it was interesting to me as well, because if someone came up to me and said like, Holmes, are you burnt out? Or like, how are you feeling? I probably won't say I'm burnt out, because as much as challenging as the work, it is equally rewarding or more. So you would always catch me with a group of students before school, after school, spring break, etc. And it's the idea that as a Black male educator, we bring more than the academics, pedagogy. It's those real life experiences that we bring. To hear 39%, I'm like, okay, that number is there, whatever. If someone asked me, I probably wouldn't say yes as well, but I know that there are times when my body is saying, you need to slow down because you're not eating right, or because you're doing so much and you're spending so much time with the students. And again, it is truly rewarding for students to look at you as a role model, and also just to have a male figure. And because I lack that in my childhood, it's just, I want to be that person that they could connect to, look up to, and beyond the classroom. Thank you.
Amazing. I'm so grateful that I got the chance to talk with both of you. I'm so grateful that you're doing the work that you're doing, and we know how important it is. We hope that through the work that DonorsChoose is doing and others around the country, that we're able to recruit and retain more Black male teachers, so you're not alone or not one of the very few, and so that we don't burn you out and don't sap all of your energy and all your power that you're giving to these young people, so that you're joined in the fight by others. Thank you so much. Such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you, DonorsChoose, for having us all here, and I'll throw it back to you.
My goodness, I am so grateful to everybody here. To John, thank you. Thank you for sharing your stories about, I think all of us here we're cool, calm, and collected over here, but we are so excited to hear it's you, Mr. Legend, and that you had teachers, counselors that played a role in your life, and you can still count the names. And
it's really true that extra time, like my dad had to go to work in the morning, and he dropped us off at our counselor's house, who lived right down the street from the school. And we would just stay at his place for the 45 minutes between when my dad dropped us off and when we went to school. And these are just little extra things that they don't get paid for, but because they connect with the Black students at the school, like they become like family members to them. And it's powerful, it's important, but it's a lot to ask of someone. And so I think this effort to get more Black males into the profession would be helpful for all the ones that are there now.
I think that's right. And before today's conversation, when we were all in the virtual green room, we talked about those of us who have young kids. I have a Black daughter, I have a Black son. And I talked about one of the most powerful moments I felt when I took him to daycare. He's only 5. At daycare was when a Black male at the daycare actually took him by the hand and walked him in. And that moment was powerful for me as a parent, but it's also because I knew the importance of seeing yourself in your teachers and how that plays into your psyche and is important for academic gains. And so it sounds like we are at least a sample size of 2 who fully can point to the importance of that.
It's really true. And I'm grateful to the teachers telling their stories, because you hear exactly that in what they've individually experienced with their young people as well.
That's exactly right. And part of in the role of retaining teachers is empowering them, giving them resources that they need. I am happy to make a fun announcement unless you want to make it, but it's with respect to classroom projects funded on DonorsChoose. Should I dive in and make that announcement, John? Or do you
Please
prefer?
do.
Okay, with a huge thank you to our funders for this entire initiative, this Male Teacher of Color initiative. As of this moment at 56 past the hour, every classroom project on DonorsChoose created by a Black male teacher has just been fully funded. So Mr. Holmes, Mr. Griffin, I know you had classroom projects posted, and that means that they're funded. So resources will soon arrive in your classroom so that while you're spending extra time over lunch or while you're doing all the extra above and beyond, you at least can feel the wind beneath your wings of resources to make it all possible. So I'm just so excited to make that announcement today.
Thank you, everybody.
Awesome. And again, to this entire group, thank you so much to Sharif El-Mekki, Dr. Travis Bristol, of course, to you, Mr. Legend, Mr. Holmes, Mr. Griffin, the whole DonorsChoose family. If there's anything that we learned today or can reinforce as we elevate this survey, it's that male teachers of color and Black men specifically are critical. They're paramount to public school classrooms. I am really grateful to our peer advisors in this space, to all of the school district officials that are tuned in right now. And of course, again, to all of our funders for this initiative, for really setting the stage for us to elevate these findings and to fund the resource needs for Black male teachers through DonorsChoose. And if I can give a shout out, both my parents are educators, but to my own dad, who is tuned in today, right now, who is a Black male educator for nearly 2 decades and who's retiring this June, who has had projects funded through DonorsChoose. I just want to salute you and all of your peers for the work that you do. And so folks, thanks again for tuning in, but more importantly, thank you for putting these findings to work so that we can better recruit and retain and empower our Black male teachers. Y'all have a good day.